Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this virtual summit presentation, Supplemental Instruction in English Composition Classroom. My name is Kelsey Wiest, and I'm an educational courseware specialist here at Hawks Learning. Our speaker today is Dr. Rebecca Mullins from Big Sandy Community and Technical College. Dr. Mullins obtained a Doctor of Arts degree in English, Pedagogy, Technology, and Literature from Murray State University, a Master of Arts degree in English from Morehead State University, and a Bachelor of Science degree in Secondary Education in English. Dr. Mullins has taught composition courses for 17 years at Big Sandy Community and Technical College in Kentucky. Before teaching at the collegiate level, she taught high school, English, theater, and oral communications for 1.5 years and taught a rotating P through 12 substitute teacher for 3 years. We're excited to have you here with us today. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter those in the Q&A box located on the panel at the top or bottom of your screen, and we'll address them at the end of the talk. And on that note, I'll turn things over to Dr. Mullins.
Well, first of all, hello to everybody, and welcome to the presentation. I was asked to kind of go through a little bit of what I do at the supplemental level for composition coursework here at KCTCS Big Sandy. Where I thought we would start is where we were and how everything came to transist. So first of all, when I first came to the college, we were using what was called developmental coursework that later became known as transitional coursework, where we were allowed to put students into classes such as the Foundations of College Writing class, Part 1 and Part 2, if they scored within a certain test level on what we were then using, which was the Compass and Assets exams. From there, what we ended up finding were some common issues was, first of all, graduation completion timeframes weren't being met according to federal financial aid laws. So that was one thing that was being impacted at the collegiate level as well as state legislator. Issue 2, course prerequisites for the Comp 1 and ended up impacting other classes that students would have to take. So there was difficulty actually putting together full-time schedules that students could take and maintain full-time status with federal financial aid. A third issue was some students, of course, obviously were misplaced based upon their test scores when we looked at test scores alone. And then issue 4, once all of these other issues started being reported through SACs and up through legislative channels, state legislators said, okay, these remedial courses, first of all, should be repetitive of what students had received at the high school level, and therefore this is repetitive content. We shouldn't be charging them. We need to find a way to get them through the system faster and get them towards degree completion, but yet also still maintain a level of success. And even students started perceiving that some of these courses were repetitive of content. So that had everything moving forward. So state legislature intervened, okay, at the state level in Kentucky. They passed a state bill that stipulated all college freshmen were going to be equipped with necessary skills to enter straight into college-ready coursework by this arbitrary deadline that they had set forth. Furthermore, stipulating that governmental funds were no longer to be utilized to pay for the transitional coursework. And they also stipulated that graduation rates and timeframes for degree completion had to become core indicators of a college's performance-based funding standards. So that forced institutions all across the state of Kentucky to look at, number one, if we were to continue with transitional coursework, how are we going to pay for this? Okay, how are we going to come up with the funds needed to cover those courses and to cover that faculty that's going to be covering these? And number two, if we do this, how are we going to do it in a way that it does not impact graduation rates? So when the deadline arbitrarily passed, some issues arose, okay? First of all, there was no singular plan in place across the state of Kentucky to discuss how we're going to account for those students who did not meet that benchmark based on the ACT exam, okay? The non-ACT exams that were being used, the Compass and the Asset, were completely phased out and retired because they were run by ACT. And then there was no designated replacement exam already in place. And then there was no support system in place for faculty, students, or institutions as a whole that said, this is the one thing you have to try. So the options that ended up becoming explored was, first of all, some KCTCS colleges went to grant funds and said, we're going to find grants that are going to pay for remedial coursework. And students were taking those classes in tandem with their Comp 1 course. Okay. Other colleges chose to co-enroll students in a workshop course. That was the first thing we at Big Sandy tried. We had an English composition course, Comp 101, with a dual enrollment English 100 workshop class that was taught by a secondary instructor. And then the third thing that was opted was the embedded supplemental instruction, where all of the instruction for any student who would have placed into the Foundations of College Writing 1 or College Writing 2 course were automatically enrolled into Comp 101, and the teacher was responsible for figuring out how they were going to remediate those students while simultaneously delivering English 101 content. So that's where we're at now at Big Sandy, is every Comp 1 class has embedded supplemental instruction. Okay, some teachers opted to use what is called Ed Ready. That's what they're currently using. Before that, they were using No Red Ink. Okay, and the students who are using the Ed Ready right now are having that as a recommended site to practice for their grammatical skills. Students are also given information, for tutoring services and being asked to go forward with that aspect by using either what is called ACE, our Academic Centers of Excellence, or using that tutor or some other embedded online tutoring resource. I, however, opted to pilot my own system of embedded instruction using Hawks, along with one-on-one counseling with the students, where they are required to come to me for one-on-one conferencing sessions at least twice during the term. And they are required to take advantage of tutoring services. I actually give them bonus points for doing so. So here's my multi-layered approach. Layer 1 is, of course, using the Hawk system. Under this, all students in my Comp 1 class have to take the diagnostic exam. This allows me to evaluate for myself what the students already know and what they need intervention on. This also has allowed me to tell if a student has accidentally maybe been placed into supplemental instruction and not really needed it, or if I've had a student that placed college ready and really needs the supplemental. So I have that flexibility to move them back and forth within the system. Also within Hawks, I have them complete peer reviews. So they're randomly being paired with other students and they get to go off of each other's strengths. And then I give them modules within Hawks. Every student automatically has grammar modules that they're going to do, but then I have a split shell creation with that single sign-in point that they launch from within Blackboard, which is the LMS we're currently using. And that split shell has 4 additional modules that are assigned only to those students who have that supplemental need. Layer 2 is that one-on-one conferencing. Students who I've identified as supplemental or who the exams have identified as supplemental have to have 2 sessions with me one-on-one throughout the term, whether that's online or whether that's face-to-face. The first conference session has to occur no later than week 4 of the term. And then I do those conferences by either bringing them to my office on my campus, or I meet them at another campus when I travel for meetings, or they meet with me virtually in Zoom. Layer 3 is the tutoring sources. Okay, like I said, that's with ACE, NetTutor. I give them editing sheets for every single essay that they have to fill out for bonus points. And then I have the ACE Center coordinator actually come in and do a session with all of them no later than week 2 of the term. That outlines what are the services available, how do you log into tutoring, what are some of the things you can come to us for, how can we do remote tutoring. So they get to ask those questions directly to the coordinator in live sessions in Zoom or live face-to-face sessions. So here's why my approach matters. My approach matters because it's going to address both the academic and the non-academic factors. Benjamin Bloom authored a book in 1976, okay, that argues all student success is determined by effective and non-academic characteristics. As much as 25%, okay, of the academic success can be directly attributed to non-academic factors. And then emotional intelligence is heavily debated in the world of pedagogy and in English. And of course, we know that that matters tremendously, okay? And that's part of that disposition category. Another non-academic factor that's been focused into tons of studies, okay? 2 key findings have emerged as a result of every single study. One, the ability to handle frustration, control emotions, get along with other people are those major contributing factors. So anytime we can have students practice that skill and hone in on it, that's going to help promote student success. Emotional intelligence also influences success more than cognitive abilities, and there's some scholars that have come up with that as well. So here's the reason why I like using the Hawks modules. The units that I've chosen for the supplemental instruction, number 1, impacts some of the non-academic factors. And then number 2, it also covers that content that would have been covered in those foundational courses. Okay, so the first unit I assign them is under Unit 0. And this encompasses them looking at things such as, what are their learning styles? Do they know how they learn best? You know, how do they manage stress? What are some of those techniques? How do they work with the organization of what they need to do in time management? What study strategies do they employ? Okay, what are some of their test-taking skills? What do they do to utilize resources? Are they aware of the resources available to them? How do they go about writing with technology? The second unit is locating key information and classifying details. That's really the primary focus of that one. The next unit falls under Unit 4 in Hawks, but it's the third one that I actually employ, which is sorting information, how to focus on paragraphs, how to organize, how to draft, and then how to really make sure topic sentences are on target and on task. And then the next one that I have them do, which is the fourth module for me for supplemental, but it's under Unit 5 in the Hawks system, is pre-writing strategies. How do they find meaning through looking at visual representations? How do they go about being an active reader instead of just passively reading over something? How do they go about making connections and determining patterns? How do they look at contextual meanings? How do they break down word parts and really have that make sense and go just beyond glancing it over and really start looking at an in-depth analysis? So here's some of the results that have come about that. And this comes from both my perspective and student perspectives, as you're going to see from the following slides. First of all, students who remain active in the course and who engage this multi-layered approach have been highly successful in the course. They've passed the class with C's, B's, and A's, okay? And we all know that, hey, if you can't get a student in the class, they're not going to be successful no matter what you do. Unfortunately, that's the downer of education, if you will. But I have found that the students who engage in this have really excelled, and they've really walked away with more confidence. They've walked away with more understanding, not only of grammar concepts, but who they are as a person and who they are as a writer. Okay, by addressing the non-academic factors, students have had that ability to not only grow in confidence, but also identify who they are in terms of that writer and identify their own writing styles, how they write best, what environments they need, what skills they need. Do they need something that's completely silent, you know, in the background, or they need a little bit of noise? You know, what are some of those things that they need to explore for them in order to really go in depth and analyze everything? And by utilizing the Hawk system, that has freed me up in class time to really focus on bringing out writing skills, writing techniques, writing strategies, writing environments, instead of focusing corely on just teaching grammar. So that's allowed me to create this more critical thinking environment that focuses more on application instead of resuscitation of concepts. And students have noticed that as well. And here's some of the comments the students have given me since we've been using Hawk, since I've been piloting this system, just so you can kind of see a little bit of the feedback that they're giving. One student said, through the use of the Hawk's peer review process, I've learned effective peer review strategies that I can use in other courses as I advance my education. Through Hawk's learning, I have learned how to give constructive feedback as well as receive feedback. Through the use of effective peer review, I will be able to give and receive feedback as I complete psychology research papers, history response papers, and math projects. I can also apply the use of peer review to my professional life. As I prepare to enter the human service field, it will be beneficial to have a peer review in my resume. With the use of peer review strategies that I've learned, I'll be able to keep and use criticism constructively. A second student says, I've learned grammar, punctuation, and usage skills that I will be able to apply as I ensure accurate and timely documentation of my services. With the use of proper grammar and punctuation, I will have confidence as I provide a permanent record for the services received by a client. Another one says, I've also improved my writing and oral communication. Throughout my life, I've always struggled with putting my thoughts into words. However, I believe that this course improved these skills. I can use the skill in school, my career, and my personal life. I can use skill in school because the school requires you to write an enormous amount of papers. Therefore, I'm now able to write documents effectively and give my audience a clear understanding of the message that I'm trying to convey. I can use this skill in my career by being able to document police reports effectively. Being in law enforcement requires you to interact with the public in everyday life. This skill allows me to be able to have adequate oral communications with other people. And of course, I want to ask you to kind of ignore a little bit of the grammar errors in this. This was taken directly from a timed reflective mini essay that they were doing in class. So it's kind of like an on-demand prompt. But for them to be able to get here with this level of writing, and these were the supplemental students. These were actually 3 of my lowest scoring students. These were 3 students who tested around the 5th grade writing level, okay, when they first entered the course, and this is where they were able to get by week 14. So that does me a little bit of heart proud and a little bit of heart good to see that. Here's some conclusions from the first year that I've been piloting this approach. First of all, using the multi-layered approach was overall effective. I had some courses where 100% of the students who tested into supplemental instruction fully engaged with this, and all of them passed the class with at least a B or better. So that tells you something. Every single semester I've used this system, only those students who did not engage were the ones who weren't successful. So this tells me that there's a need to develop further ways to address even more non-academic factors, and that faculty need to be prepared to identify students who are inaccurately deemed ready or not ready for college level coursework, and have the strategies in place in order to assist those students. So, like I said, with this, I have managed to catch some students who didn't test really well on the diagnostic, but who the TABE test, which is the test we now use, said, hey, these students are 100% college ready. I was able to intervene with those students immediately, ask them about their past background, and then determine along with them, hey, should you really be doing the supplemental coursework? And I've had students who, after that first meeting and that first initial conference, said, yes, go ahead and flip me over to supplemental. I've had others who said, you know, I just didn't test well on that TABE exam after that first conference, and they tested really high with the diagnostic and said, you know what, I think it was just I didn't take that test seriously. So let's try to go the other route. So this system really gave me that flexibility to do that. So here's the crucial next steps that I've told my administrators after me piloting this system versus what my colleagues were doing with the others. First of all, we need to analyze student feedback. How do they perceive everything is going? And that's the reason why I look at data, okay, in terms of pass rates. I look at who tested in, who tested out, who did what with the diagnostic, as well as what were their scores on the exam that placed them into the supplemental instruction. I do that personally with everything that I do with Hawks, and then I analyze their feedback. I have all of my students in Comp 101 do that reflective essay at the end that tells me what do they think they learned, what were their takeaways with the overall course. And I don't tell them specifically to review Hawks, but that always becomes a part of the review. They always include that without fail. And I also told them they need to be taking a look at, now that the others are now using EdReady instead of NoReading, are they getting the same results? So that's the thing that we're looking at next, because EdReady has now been used for a full year at the end of this term with the other instructors, and I will have now been using Hawks for over a full year, so that data should be there. We need to be looking at replacing the current non-ACT course placement exam with a more effective placement tool. And we need to be facilitating discussions regarding all factors, academic and non-academic, that impact student success, and how we need to go about evaluating them, as well as exploring possible interventions. So I want to go ahead and end it there and open it up for any questions. And I'll stop screen sharing. If I need to go back in and start it again, I will.
Thank you, Dr. Mullins. So we do have a couple questions. I'm going to start with, at some point in your presentation, you mentioned the ACE program. Do you mind clarifying what the ACE is?
Of course. The ACE is our on-campus tutoring services, okay? And it stands for Academic Center for Excellence. So they came up with that acronym because they wanted to help students ace their coursework, okay? So that's the way they kind of explain it to them. But we have that center located on our 3 main campuses, which is Pikeville, Prestonsburg, and Paintsville. It is run alongside of our library services department. And students can go in there and receive one-on-one live tutoring face-to-face, or they can also submit tutoring requests for virtual tutoring.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, for any additional questions, please send those to the Q&A box. I'm going to also ask, can you clarify the types of topics that you're typically assigning in your peer reviews? I know you mentioned you do those throughout the semester.
Of course. I had them do one for each of their 3 major essays. So in the Comp 1 course, my English 101, I have them first of all do what's called a semiotic analysis essay, where they have to use all the types of imagery in order to describe themselves as being represented symbolically by an inanimate object of their choice. So with that, what we're doing is we're focusing on the grammar concepts that I'm introducing the first 4 weeks, which are like your fragments, run-ons, comma splices, few sentences. So I'm having them work on modules that deal with that, but I also assign them modules that deal with the concepts for that essay. So like with this first essay where it's descriptive, they have to do the module that deals with peer reviews first of all, so they know how to do a peer review effectively. And then they have to do a module that deals with how to deal with descriptive writing. So the modules line up with the essays themselves, and then I give them specific things that I want them to look at in terms of peer review. I give them cued questions within the modules, and then I also give them the requirement to make 3 comments that are generalized statements that are going to be constructive in nature, and then they have to do 3 of the tags, okay, that point out grammatical issues or formatting issues, things like that. And then the next essay I had them do, I had them go straight from that into the compare and contrast evaluation essay that requires them to do research, where they have to research 3 key points of evaluation, and they have to become judge and jury. Okay, they have to actually make a verdict over what's best. So with that one, again, modules that deal with comparison, modules that deal with evaluation, how do we come up with evaluation criteria? And then the third one comes after midterm. I spend the first 8 weeks really hitting hard and heavy all of the grammar concepts and teaching them here's the right way to write academically. And then I kind of want to see, in a tricky way, how well did they get that? So at the tail end of the term, I've developed a creative writing unit built around the world of fairy tales. And here they get to help break the rules of grammar, but only if they can do it with a defined purpose. So in order to break them, they have to know them. So with that unit, they get modules that deal with narrative writing? How do I tell a tale? And do it effectively? How do I employ dialogue and do that effectively and not just make it there for dialogue's sake? How do I make all of these aspects interconnect and come together? So with every single peer review that they do, they're looking for specific things and they're going up a level. The first one, I kind of want to see what they think, and I give them that first module, and I give them very simple things to do. The second one, I take it up and say, okay, let's dive a little bit deeper with our constructive feedback. Instead of just saying simply, okay, great job, but can you do this better? Look at it more critically. And of course, they're developing that skill further as they go along.
Thank you. The next question is two-part. First, do you include grades in the course for attending tutoring sessions? And then as a follow-up, what are the consequences if students don't go to the tutoring or your conference sessions?
Okay, yes. As a matter of fact, I give them bonus points for the editing sheets for the tutoring. So every essay has an editing sheet that they will fill out and take to the tutoring center if it's ACE. Of course, NetTutor doesn't do the actual editing sheets. Instead, they give PDF files back. Okay, and students can attach those. So of course, they're, number one, missing bonus points. Number two, they're missing that feedback. And then when they get my comments back on their drafts, if I've noticed that they've not followed the steps that I have in place, such as peer reviews, such as going through the tutoring center, then I'm going to comment, hey, can you see why this wasn't of benefit to you? And we conference over that. I actually call them in. Now, if they miss my conferences, they also, again, miss bonus points, but I actually hound them to nobody's end. So they do not actually miss those conferences with me at all because I'm constantly reminding them. Once I get them in for that first one, here's the big thing that happens. Once they have that first conference with me and they see the benefit that I'm not there, hey, this isn't me going to chew you out. This isn't me going to tell you that you should know this by now. This is here to benefit you and for me to get to know you as a person. They end up actually coming to me more than twice a semester. I have never had a semester where students have, once they've hit that first one, not come to me more than twice. The only time students don't come to those conference sessions is when they're not even coming to class. I can't get them on phone. I can't get them on email. They show up for that first class session so they can be counted active, okay, for financial aid purposes and don't get dropped. And then they don't come for anything else. But then what I discover is they're also not coming to their other classes. And so none of us are getting those students. And so that's the other reason why I'm saying we've got to start looking at what's going on with those students. Why are they bowing out quite so quickly? So that's the big thing there. I have found that once I get them over that hurdle of trying that first thing, they really get into it. With peer review, are they nervous the first time they do it? Absolutely. They are so nervous. Like, but we don't even understand this ourselves. Well, that's the point. The more you read your own work, the more you read somebody else's work, the easier this is going to become. And I'm not asking you to do this for their grade. Yes, you're getting graded on it. I give them 10 points for the upload. I give them 30 points for the review. So that's 40 points, grand total for the peer review process. But the thing is that you're there to practice these skills. These are skills that you're going to have to do on your job. So I really stress that to them. You're going to have to meet with bosses, to have conferences, to go over your performance. You got to get used to doing this. So I word it to them that way.
Okay, our next question is regarding research. What kind of research do your students do?
Okay, in the Comp 1 class, I have them research mandatory. Okay, now some of them end up driving into other research beyond what I require, of course. But for the compare and contrast essay, I make sure that everything they do is credible. Okay, so for that compare and contrast essay, they have to compare 2 items, and each item has to have at least one source, okay, to back up a point that they're making. So it really depends on what topic they choose. And I really try to encourage them to make it either something they're already researching, like if they're already looking at buying a home, then research the APR rates. you know, for the different types of loans. If they're already exploring more than one career field, research the 2 career fields. What are the differences? Or research the one field that you know the least about. What are those concepts that you want to explore? And they work with me, they work with the tutoring center, and they work with our librarian that I have embedded in every single class to conduct that research. They actually go to the library twice during that unit in order to conduct that. I go over constantly what is valid research, and I start to introduce them to the concept of scholarly research, although we don't require that at KCTCS until they hit Comp 2.
Thank you. So you mentioned toward the beginning of your presentation that you didn't initially start out with a supplemental instruction model, and that you started out first with co-enrolling. Do you mind clarifying just a little bit more about what perhaps didn't work for your students in your school in this co-enrolling model?
Well, one of the most frustrating things for me with the co-enrollment model was when they launched that. I, as the Comp 1 teacher, had my students only for the Comp 1 class. The workshop class, the English 101, was taught by the teachers and the faculty who were our transitional studies teachers. Okay, so my students had both me and another instructor, and I had zero access to what that other instructor was doing with my students. I couldn't see their platform. I couldn't see what they were utilizing. And the way it was being worked at that point was the other instructor was using a platform called No Red Ink. Okay, so students were basically be given this online grammar platform, and that's all No Red Ink was at that point. That's what they were utilizing it for, as just additional grammar skills. Okay, well, to me, if a student's not getting grammar for grammar's sake, they need something additional to go along with it. Okay, and then of course, after that first year, when we saw that approach wasn't working, they tried to transition that workshop to where that teacher reached out and said, okay, so what type of materials are you using? What types of essays are you using? What types of materials can you give me to go more in depth with that essay? And so it seemed like it was really confusing the students, going back and forth between having me in one area and then having another teacher in another area. And then the other thing about that was that workshop class was supposed to function to where if they did not pass the workshop, they could not pass Comp 1. But logistically, how would that work when you're entering separate grades? Because each one was given a grade. I would give a grade for Comp 1. The other instructor would give a grade for Comp 100, okay, which would be the workshop. So technically, a student could pass my class and not pass Comp 100, but under that premise, they were not supposed to be able to go on to Comp 2. But technically, they passed Comp 1 under me. They just didn't go to their Comp 100 class. So we had all of these issues like that that came forward from it. So that's what made us go forward to, okay, if we're not going to do that, then how are we going to embed? And then plus with the Comp 100, we were still charging students for a 1 credit hour course. And so they were still having that financial burden that they weren't seeing the point of going to. It was still counting as a 1 credit hour against their financial aid. It was still counting as 1 credit hour that was taking the place of another course that they could have used to make degree progress. So we weren't fully addressing all of those performance standards.
Thank you. That was really helpful. It looks like at this point we've got all of our questions addressed. If anyone does have any last minute questions you'd like to answer, again, type those into the Q&A box. It should be at the bottom of your screen. If not, I want to go ahead and thank you, Dr. Mullins, for your time today, and thank everyone for attending. If you do have questions that come up following this webinar, please feel free to direct those to us at marketing@hawkslearning.com. We'll be emailing a link to all of our sessions at the conclusion of our virtual summit, and posting PowerPoint slides along with those virtually. So We'll be sure to share the recording. Thank you again, Dr. Mullins, for your time, and I hope that everyone has a great Friday. Thank you so much.